Greetings to you all. It's a real pleasure to join you, and thank you to the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council and the African Hydrogen Partnership for organising this event. Today, the Putin regime's illegal and brutal invasion of Ukraine has created an immense and immediate danger. And of course, the brave people of Ukraine are rightly at the forefront of all our minds. Yet we're aware that the chronic threat of climate change remains. That threat impacts each and every country in the Commonwealth. Climate does not recognise borders. Yet some countries are more affected than others, and we know that many of our members are particularly vulnerable, from the small island states in the Pacific and Caribbean to many of our friends across Africa and Asia. Over the past year, I've had the opportunity to visit Barbados, Bangladesh, India, Jamaica, Kenya, and Nigeria, and discuss the impacts of climate change directly with your governments. I've also spoken with Pacific leaders, and in Antigua and Barbuda, I witnessed the devastating impacts of Hurricane Irma 4 years on. As a family of nations, we have a duty to protect one another. And working together to innovate and accelerate new clean technologies will be absolutely key to this. Through collaboration, we can innovate faster, we can achieve greater economies of scale, and we can increase incentives for investment. And that is why building up international collaboration has been central to the UK's COP26 presidency. We've launched forums for international collaboration around energy transition, the transition to zero-emission vehicles, and the global trade in agricultural commodities. And at COP26 last November, we launched the Glasgow Breakthroughs. 45 countries, including Commonwealth nations, agreed to work together to accelerate the development and deployment of clean technologies to ensure that they're accessible and available to all. And countries agreed to collaborate on specific technologies. 37 countries, including Australia, Canada, Kenya, Namibia, India, New Zealand, and the UK, agreed to work together on the hydrogen breakthrough to ensure affordable, renewable, and low-carbon hydrogen is globally available by 2030. And this year, we're inviting leading hydrogen initiatives, which we hope will include the Africa Green Hydrogen Alliance, to come together with the aim of identifying opportunities to strengthen international collaboration towards meeting this goal. Hydrogen was one of 4 specific technologies covered by the Glasgow Breakthroughs because we recognize its enormous potential. It can help us to overcome some of the trickiest decarbonisation challenges, including our vital industrial sectors. For example, hydrogen could play a key role in decarbonising steel production or indeed shipping. And the current crisis is a stark reminder of the security benefits of moving away from fossil fuel dependency. And hydrogen can also boost our economies, creating good green jobs. The UK's own hydrogen strategy, which we published last year, sets up the UK hydrogen economy to support over 9,000 jobs and unlock £4 billion worth of investment by 2030. And the UK wants to work with other countries, collaborating to drive hydrogen innovation and to support the green transition globally. For example, through our UK Pact and our Clean Energy Innovation Facility, we are supporting countries, including Commonwealth countries, to develop green hydrogen opportunities. Within the Commonwealth, there are countries with an abundance of solar and wind energy. They have the potential to produce significant amounts of green hydrogen and become the energy producers of the future, whilst other Commonwealth members have the resources to invest and develop the technology and build demand. By working together across the Commonwealth, we can help to unlock this nascent technology by increasing both supply and demand to support a global market. So I welcome this conference and encourage all Commonwealth countries and businesses to collaborate to this end to help deliver economic opportunity, energy security, and prosperity for all. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Alok, for that. My name is Hugo Swire. I'm the Deputy Chairman of the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council, and a very warm welcome to you all, wherever you may be tuning in from around the world. As we just heard from Alok Sharma, who of course was president of COP26, governments around the world have committed to dramatically lowering their CO2 emissions to fight climate change. And now, with a finite supply of fossil fuels and increasing evidence of their detrimental environmental impact, countries are transitioning on a mass scale. Green hydrogen has the potential to be a critical enabler of the global transition to sustainable energy and net zero emission economies. Over the last year, and accelerated due to geopolitical events, some of which Alok has just alluded to, there has been unprecedented momentum around the world to fulfill hydrogen's long-standing potential as a clean energy solution. Hydrogen offers zero emission solutions for hard to abate sectors, including heavy duty transportation and carbon intensive industries such as steel and ammonia production, as well as other chemical processes. So CWIC is delighted to partner on this webinar with the African Hydrogen Partnership, the AHP, and I much look forward to an engaging discussion on the challenges, the investment opportunities, and how the Commonwealth can be used as a platform to coordinate and share knowledge to advance the hydrogen revolution. This session will help set the agenda for discussions ahead of the Commonwealth Business Forum during the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, CHOGM, to be held in Kigali, Rwanda, from the 21st to the 23rd of June. And those of you who are alert at this point will notice that the foothills behind me are in fact the foothills of Kigali, waiting to welcome you all in June. For those of you who don't know, the CBF, the Commonwealth Business Forum, is the official business event of the Commonwealth, held alongside a couple of days before the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, CHOGM, colloquially known as CHOGM, and we organise that at our organisation. If you'd like to be involved, please contact our team. It's filling up very quickly. We've got people coming from all around the Commonwealth, indeed from all around the world. So before we move on, a small introduction to who we are, for those of you who don't know us yet. We're a not-for-profit commercial membership organisation with a mandate from Commonwealth Heads of Government to promote trade and investment across the association's 54 member nations. We do this by convening the Commonwealth Business Forum alongside the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, the Commonwealth Games Business Forum alongside the Commonwealth Games coming up shortly in Birmingham, and running webinars, seminars, and events across the Commonwealth. I always say unashamedly, we keep out of the politics of the Commonwealth. We are unashamedly about creating better business within the Commonwealth, intra-Commonwealth trade. Outside of COVID, we have run trade missions and delegations. I'm delighted to say that we ran our first trade mission in nearly 2 years, just last month, not to the Commonwealth, but to Dubai. In short, we are the Commonwealth Business Network, and it's this globe-spanning network that we convene to support our members. We also have a division within our organization called the Commonwealth Legal Network, which is a grouping of legal firms throughout the Commonwealth who can then network with each other. That's proving to be enormously helpful to many companies trying to get a foothold in a new market with which they're unfamiliar. I'd like to remind all our guests here today that CWIC is a membership organization. We work on behalf of our members. We provide bespoke services, and we're confident we can open new opportunities and new markets for you. If you're not members of our organization, you certainly should be, and we can help you with your business development right across the 54 countries of the Commonwealth family. I'm delighted, without further ado, to introduce Nienke Homan. I think I've got the pronunciation right, having been rehearsing it most of the morning, who will be chairing today's discussion. She's smiling, so I assume it's not too bad what I've just said. Nienke is an international hydrogen leader and change maker focused on accelerating green hydrogen and global green growth. She is currently president of the Sustainable Hydrogen Club and was previously a regional minister for the province of Groningen in the northern Netherlands. So Nienke, over to you. Thank you.
Wonderful pronunciation. And what a great way to welcome everyone to this webinar. And thanks to the speakers for these inspiring words about green hydrogen, and of course, especially about the role of the Commonwealth in the transition to a sustainable economy. And it is an honor to moderate this webinar and to introduce to you all these inspiring speakers. But first, a little bit about myself. Indeed, I used to be a regional minister for 7 years in the Northern Netherlands, a region built on a large natural gas field that unfortunately caused earthquakes and damaged our houses. And so our region had to change from natural gas to green hydrogen, and we were in a hurry. But it led to a situation where we were appointed as the first European hydrogen valley, including lots of new jobs, prosperity, and perspective. So it is possible if you join forces and see the opportunities. And that's what our panelists will tell about. So after the panelists, we will have a panel discussion, also based on your questions, and you can leave them in the chat. But first, I'll introduce to you the panelists. First, Ibukun Ababayo, Group Director, Sustainable Finance and Investment Strategy in the London Stock Exchange. And Stephen Jackson, Chief Intelligence Officer at Hydrogen Europe. And he, of course, will tell more about Hydrogen Europe. We have Ambassador Siene Nafel, the spokesperson of the African Group Negotiators at COP26. Welcome. We have Famik Nurshah, the Head of Origination of UK Export Finance. And Frank Wouters, Chairman of the MENA Hydrogen Alliance, and will tell us more about Middle East, hydrogen, of course, and India, but also about the opportunities. But first, of course, some more practical information about hydrogen. I will give the floor to Bamidele Adebesi. Thank you, and the floor is yours. Yes, perfect.
All right, thank you, Ninka, for that great introduction. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me now? Great. All right, so in the short time that I have, my job really is to set the scene. So it's to explain green hydrogen, the science behind it, opportunities, challenges, and talk about green hydrogen produced in Africa and as well in Commonwealth. So I'll just go into that straight away. So 75% of our universe mass is made of hydrogen. So that tells you that hydrogen is all around us, actually. So this chemical element is, it's odorless in its standard form, it's tasteless and has no color. I'll come back to that later. It is highly combustible. By that, it means that it's able to catch fire and burn easily to produce useful energy. So it combines itself when it burns with oxygen to produce water. And that is why it got its name from maker, the Greek name maker of water, hydrogen, hydro, water, gene, generate, maker of water. So hydrogen is highly reactive. So what that means really is that that's the reason why pure hydrogen hardly exists alone. It is clinging, it attracts itself to various compounds, various elements to form another compound. The example is what you have in natural gas, where it combines itself with carbon. For this reason, a significant quantity of energy is needed to separate hydrogen from such compounds. And actually, it is this reason, right, actually, meaning the process of separating hydrogen from its compounds that defines or differentiates one hydrogen type from the other. So there are four types of hydrogen that we're talking about today. So the first one is brown hydrogen. So brown hydrogen is made from coal using a process known as gasification. The second type of hydrogen is gray hydrogen that is made from natural gas. Actually, about 95% plus of current hydrogen are made this way. What is common to both brown and gray hydrogen is the fact that they emit CO2 to the environment. So blue hydrogen is basically technology that is, a type that is brought to address these challenges of hydrogen and the impact it has on our climate. Therefore, we have carbon capture and storage. So you capture the CO2 that brown and gray hydrogen produce, and you try to reduce the carbon impact. So it's low carbon. Green hydrogen, which is the last one and our focus for today, is actually a type of hydrogen that is produced from renewable sources. So, from the definition, it is zero carbon because it produces no CO2 to the environment. Now, a key component of green hydrogen that's necessary for us to know when you talk about green hydrogen, I'll call them technologies or machines. The first one, among others, is electrolyzer, and the second is fuel cell. Electrolyzer basically split water into hydrogen and oxygen. That's what it does. And fuel cell does the opposite, which is it takes hydrogen from any source and then combine that with oxygen to produce water, electricity, and heat. So it's basically like opposite of each other. So these two technologies and others are key components that you need in producing and utilizing hydrogen at scale. Now, this graph on the left basically shows you the world per capita energy consumption, the outlook today and in the past. So it's very straightforward. It shows that in the past 60 years, energy consumption continues to increase, and that is not going to stop. We've seen that in the next 60 years as well. You see the same trend higher and higher due to population growth and many other factors. But at the same time, there's been a global shift of regulators, investors, and consumers towards decarbonization. Everybody's talking about net zero. This is a big driver here. And that is why the graph on the right-hand side basically shows the fact that, okay, today, green hydrogen production may be relatively low, but actually in the next maybe 10 years, that will go really high, and it's going to be in tenfold by 2050. So the reason for this is because, the world has seen hydrogen as a key energy transition pillar. It is like a major solution to net zero. Actually, there's the expectation that 20 to 24% of energy consumption between now and 2050 will be from hydrogen. So there's been unprecedented interest and investment. There's falling, and this has been really interesting because there's falling cost of renewables. Electrolyzer has quadrupled in the past year. Countries with hydrogen strategy doubled in 2021. So it used to be 13, now we have 26, and about 22 of other countries are in the process of finalizing this. This is really exciting and interesting for all. I think the question at this junction is, why do we need to, why talk about hydrogen? Why not just produce hydrogen and use it? Why do we need green hydrogen produced in Africa? I think this is very critical. First, because green hydrogen from Africa and elsewhere in Commonwealth will help the world to decarbonize. Specifically in the UK, for example, there was a target for 5 gigawatts of hydrogen by 2050. That was actually doubled only last week. Europe has a target for about 80 gigawatts plus. And but what is central and unique in all this is the fact that it has been understood that most of this will be produced outside of Europe. All right, if it's going to be produced outside of Europe, the reason for that is geography and many other factors. So Africa and elsewhere in Commonwealth are great places where such energy could be produced because one, the proximity to Europe, there's been good and strong relationship with Europe over the years, and also abundance of wind and solar in these countries. So that will really help, the generation of green hydrogen in Africa and piping it or shipping such to Europe will help to decarbonize Europe, decarbonize the world. There's also, in addition to that's the benefit to Europe, obviously, but Africa stands to then benefit because some of these countries actually struggle already in trying to meet their energy demand locally. So with green hydrogen and the scalability and flexibility of being able to work with hydrogen means that they will be able to meet local energy consumption in industry and in heating and home. But actually, most importantly, many of these countries, actually 80% of some of these countries also consume energy. For cooking, they go in the wood, get some wood too, which is bad for the world in terms of deforestation. So hydrogen will reduce that. And lastly, on this point is the attractment of investment in the high energy intensive industries. High energy intensive industries, as been alluded to earlier on, like steel, paper, and pulp, cement, and so on around the world, they have to decarbonize in order to reach our net zero targets. So currently, some of them actually get raw materials from Africa and Commonwealth. They ship it to their country for manufacturing. So I think with hydrogen, there won't be any need for that because they could basically take these factories to Africa. It is closer to energy and closer to raw material. This is good for in terms of return on investment for in such companies and industries. It's good for Africa because that will create wealth, strong economy, strong foreign exchange earnings, and so on and so forth. So, but as I wrap up, I think the key thing here is, all right, so for the future, in terms of what are the things that we need to bear in mind? Well, first and foremost, we need to consider the fact that the whole value chain of this, we need high volume of renewable energy, obviously, solar, wind, and the rest. Electrolyzers that I mentioned earlier on to produce hydrogen from renewables, we need to scale up, we need to be in higher capacity. There's also, because the nature of hydrogen means you need to store it in a certain way, high pressure, lower temperature, and so on. That will also require a huge investment in infrastructure and in the way it's utilized. But with what we've seen over the past few years is that the prices of these components are reducing as we scale up. At the moment, green hydrogen is not as competitive as blue hydrogen, nor is it competitive with the other type of energy carrier. However, in the next 10 years, the expectation is that this will kind of reduce drastically due to what I've said earlier on in terms of scale up. In fact, the expectation, for example, in the UK is that there's going to be one kilogram will be $1 in the next 1 decade. That would be amazing because that will actually make green hydrogen cheaper than diesel. That would be excellent. But there are other, like mountains to climb in terms of R&D, in terms of skill development. We also need to talk about traceability system, something that's able to track and differentiate between different types of hydrogen. And all this combined and new technology will help in scale up and help in enhancing competitiveness. As a wrap up, this is, I think, a slide that tells us area of investment, area across the value chains that we can be looking at, from the production to how we move hydrogen from one point to another, how we store it, how we transport it, and other areas outside of being energy carrier, which I'll be touching on later, particularly in using hydrogen as a feedstock. Thank you very much, Dinka. I hope I've been able to keep the time.
Thank you very much. And I see a lot of questions getting in, so we're going to ask the questions to the panelists later on. So thank you very much about actually the opportunities and the investment opportunities. So thank you. And let's move on to Stephen Jackson from Hydrogen Europe.
Yes, thank you, Ninke, and good morning, everyone. So I'm Stephen Jackson from Hydrogen Europe. Our mission as an organization is to propel global carbon neutrality by accelerating the EU's hydrogen industry. As an association, we represent roughly 350 members. Our membership is growing quite rapidly as the interest for hydrogen is. We predominantly represent industry throughout the value chain, all the different production pathways, transmission and distribution, as well as all the different end uses. But we also represent national trade associations, essentially in Europe, as well as regions. So the political entities have joined us as well. Very important in the context of what we call hydrogen valleys in Europe, which are sort of mini demonstration projects of our entire ecosystem. As trade association, our role is primarily to work on policy elements in Europe, as well as research and innovation, industrial development and deployment, and also we do the whole communications around our ecosystem in Europe. Primarily, I mean, all of our activities basically are geared towards creating markets for hydrogen technologies in Europe, but not only in Europe, also outside. And therefore, it's very important for us to build strong ties with other partner organizations outside of Europe, whether it be in the MENA region, in Africa, the Commonwealth altogether. Because in order to deploy this whole ecosystem and make sure we meet our targets, we need to ensure synergies between different continents for the deployment of hydrogen technologies and use of hydrogen technologies. So just to give you a bit of an idea in Europe, what's going on at the moment. So we have actually enshrined in law the net zero target by 2050 within the climate law. We've adopted what is called the hydrogen strategy and the Fit for 55 package, which is basically an intermediary target of 55% decarbonization by 2030. So we're moving quite rapidly in Europe, and hydrogen features quite significantly within all those different packages. I think it was mentioned by the previous panelists, the different production pathways for hydrogen, but also all the different end uses, whether it be for mobility, land, sea and air, industrial, steel making, cement, ammonia production, and so forth, but also for buildings and heating and so forth. And within that context, the target is indeed 80 gigawatts by 2030. Which is a very ambitious target, but is actually going to be, or is reviewed upwards now, because linked to recent developments that have unfortunately occurred in Eastern Europe, linked to the Ukrainian conflict, the EU now has an urgency to reduce dependencies on Russian hydrocarbons. And that means that basically the trend that was already ongoing now needs to dramatically accelerate. And when I say the targets are being updated upwards, we're now looking at approximately 350 gigawatts. And that means about 20 million tons of hydrogen by 2030. 10 million tons being produced within the European Union and 10 million tons being produced outside of the European Union. And as was mentioned before, well, the hydrogen industry needs high access to renewable energy sources. And in Europe, we obviously have wind and solar, but we do not have sufficient resources in order to cover our needs. And therefore, partnership with other continents is of absolute importance in order to meet the targets, well, the very ambitious targets in Europe. And this whole new sort of framework is under the umbrella of what is called the Repower EU. So this is to reduce our dependencies, and we are going to launch in Europe a dedicated partnership with within the Mediterranean called the Mediterranean Hydrogen Partnership that will also span beyond the Mediterranean to include as well MENA regions and other African and Commonwealth countries. And there, what's going to be extremely important is, well, obviously, to produce hydrogen within European neighboring countries, but also to develop the whole necessary infrastructure in order to transport hydrogen to Europe, whether it be through dedicated pipelines in northern Africa, or through shipping using ammonia, for example. So, I mean, quite a bit of work will need to be done on the infrastructure side. And then also not to forget, I mean, hydrogen use, I mean, it's not only for export for Europe, it's also for use in domestic markets, spot markets, for example, for fertilizer production in Africa, or for backup power. So there are quite some uses also on I would say the predominantly African continent. So yeah, so I think needless to say that the target's ambitious, sorry, and we all need to work together to achieve them, and partnerships are absolutely crucial between different continents and within Commonwealth countries. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Yes, that's indeed what we need. We need to connect the dots. We need to connect the hydrogen valleys, and we need to connect regions, but also the production side and the demand side. So wonderful. And I'd love to ask Ambassador Sene Navo to tell some more about how to kickstart this part and how to kickstart the hydrogen economy. Please.
Thank you, Nike, and good morning, good afternoon, colleagues. So I'll start with my role at the COP as the spokesperson for the African nations there. So you know, Africa is 54 countries, and they all come as one block in the negotiation. I think we're the only region which does that for the longest, for the last 20 years. And I've had the opportunity and honor to be the spokesperson for the group in the last 10 years. So engaging both in the negotiations as well as having an interest in seeking opportunities beyond the negotiations. And hydrogen, of course, is right now the talk of, not the talk of the town, but more than that, the potential to decarbonize the global economy is clear, both as a green electron and a green molecule. So as I mean, Stefan presented the Hydrogen Europe, AHP, the Africa Hydrogen Partnership, works on the supply side, and a number of African countries have already developed their hydrogen strategy. Morocco, South Africa, Namibia is coming. Egypt, who's hosting COP27, also has very high ambition when it comes to hydrogen. Mauritania, Tanzania. Every other month now, we have an African country who wants to join. And maybe one word which is important, because 10-15 years ago, there was the same kind of excitement around solar or renewable energy. There were even projects of turning the desert into solar plants. And that was a very outward looking approach, an approach in sort of turning the continent as a large scale producer and exporter of raw material or feedstock. And this time around, I think we want to take advantage and really power domestic markets, industrialize the continent. This is a very versatile element. It's as I said, it's both a green electron and a green molecule. So the opportunities to finally industrialize the continent in a rapid manner at scale in those important sectors such as fertilizers, energy, electricity, green aluminum, green iron, fuels, synthetic fuels, for instance. There's a lot of opportunities to now, beyond exporting to the West, for instance, or elsewhere, for hard currencies, to really use it to power domestic markets. And that's an area that the Africa Hydrogen Partnership is working really closely on, whether through advocacy or quantitative studies to sort of see where we can really use that to power and industrialize markets. So we have a number of African countries which are already in the Commonwealth. So and that number is growing as well. So there's opportunities to share lessons and learn lessons even within the continent and beyond. So there's an opportunity to collaborate and partner in the fight against climate change, because we've seen that decarbonization targets, net zero targets, have been a driver for the hydrogen revolution that we are seeing. So this is an extremely important point, and this is also a driver to mobilize climate finance and do the kind of institutional and regulatory enabling environment which is needed. So a massive opportunity to partner, massive opportunity to collaborate at scale, regionally and globally, and definitely as the Africa Hydrogen Partnership, we're very happy to be here and to turn such a vision in reality. Thank you.
Yeah, wow, green hydrogen as a driver. That sounds good. Yeah, I'm talking about green hydrogen revolution. So thank you very much. And yeah, the next speaker is Frank Wouters. And I forgot to say that he is also at DII in the advisory board and at Reliance Industries. So Frank, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Nienke. It's a pleasure to be here today. And let me start by making a confession, because as a professional, I've done nothing else but renewable energy in my career, more than 30 years now, and I have always underestimated solar energy. And if I go back to the 90s of the last century, we did a study in Europe and tried to predict through scenarios how much solar PV there would be in 2010, which was then far out. And at the time we only had, I think, a few hundred megawatts of solar PV connected to the grid on the entire planet. And even the most aggressive scenario grossly underestimated reality. And the question is, why is that? Why did we underestimate solar? And then I think it's important to understand what solar is, which is basically solar PV is a conversion technology that turns sunshine, which is free, directly into the most valuable and versatile form of energy, which is electricity. And the technology to do that is relatively simple. Now, the fact is, if you look at technology, and that is the same for cell phones, for flat screen TVs, solar panels, many things, the more you make them, the cheaper they become. And that can be expressed in learning rate. For example, solar photovoltaics, the last 15 years, the learning rate was 40%, which means that every doubling of output, every doubling of capacity would make it 40% cheaper. And that leads to exponential growth, because of course, if it's cheaper, you can replace more things with it. That leads to more volume, leads to ever lower cost, etc. So that is a spiral that leads to exponential growth. And exponential growth is difficult for humans to grasp. If something grows exponentially, we tend to underestimate it. And we also have to realize that with all the excitement about renewable electricity, because that has been a success story, I think, globally in the last 10, 15 years, we also have to realize that electricity is only 20% of all final energy. 80% of the energy we use are molecules. Those are, that's coal, that's natural gas, that's diesel, gasoline, etc. And if we want to become, zero carbon, which we have to be latest by 2050, we have to replace all fossil fuels. And that will be a mixture of green electricity, of course, some level of biomass, although there is some issues with growing biomass, food competition, environmental, etc., and green hydrogen. And hydrogen is very cheap to transport and store overseas. And that is an important aspect of hydrogen that should not be underestimated, and which is much more difficult to do with electricity. Transporting electricity over longer distances is 10, 15 times more expensive, and you cannot really store electricity. Electricity, by definition, is a flow of electrons. But hydrogen, like natural gas and a heap of coal, you can store loss-free very cheaply over a season. Now, if you then look at hydrogen, how you make it in an electrolyzer using solar electricity or wind, it looks a lot like solar PV. You can do it on a very small scale, on a massive scale, and you can basically do it everywhere. I mean, there is solar panels on the North Pole. Yes, they are not as effective as of course, in the Sun Belt, but it can still work. And the same will be for hydrogen. So I think, the bottom line is that I think that hydrogen, given the parallels to photovoltaics, I think it will grow much, much faster than people think, and it will be much, much bigger. Now, how fast can it grow? I did an analysis of several hydrogen growth scenarios, including, in Europe, and a comparison with the development of the solar photovoltaic market yields a potential global electrolyzer capacity of 13 gigawatts by 2050, which would then be able to produce so much hydrogen that we can cover 50% of all final energy. And that would indicate an annual growth percentage of 33.5%, which is much more than most people think. And mind you, I have this baggage that we've always underestimated the growth of solar photovoltaics. And I do think that we're doing the same with hydrogen. Now, another consideration is how fast should we push for the energy transition? Because there is people that say, oh, we cannot afford to transition everything quickly, etc. So I recently modeled 3 pathways for an economy roughly the size of Europe. A gradual pathway from now till 2050, where we have to be zero carbon, an accelerated pathway, which basically does the energy transition in the first 15 years until 2035, and a delayed pathway where you basically do nothing for the first 15 years, and then you have to do everything from 2035 to 2050. Now, the results are extremely clear. The delayed transition is 20% more expensive than the gradual transition, and it's $7.7 trillion more expensive than the accelerated pathway. And of course, the emissions in the late transition are 4 times higher, the emissions of CO2. So that is really not an option that we should try to pursue. Now let's get back to the Middle East, because I'm normally based in Abu Dhabi. And there is a lot of excitement about the potential relationship between the Gulf states and Europe. I mean, Europe will remain a net energy importer also in the future, and hydrogen as one of the major energy carriers of the future is important. And as we've just heard, the European Commission has recently upped the demand for hydrogen to 20 million tons, up from 5.6 in 2030. Now that requires, if you do the numbers, 350 gigawatts of electrolyzer capacity in the next 7 to 8 years. 50% of that needs to be imported. So there is a huge opportunity. And if I then look at the Gulf, Oman is working on a hydrogen strategy. Saudi Arabia is working on it, and the United Arab Emirates. All of these countries have land. They have, of course, abundant sunshine. Some have good wind, and for them, producing green hydrogen is a natural addition to actually producing hydrocarbons. So it's not very far away. They're very interested in it, and they can do it. Now, the European Energy Commissioner, Kadri Simpson, recently asked me to brief her on the potential hydrogen relationship between the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and the European Union. Then if you do those numbers, the 10 million tons that Europe needs to be imported by 2030, Saudi Arabia has already indicated they would like to cover 25% of that. And that's 2.5 million tons. In energy terms, that's 83 terawatt hours. These are massive, massive numbers. And they would mobilize a lot of capital, a lot of innovation to make that work in the years to come. Now, the next question is, how do you get the hydrogen from Saudi Arabia to Europe? We looked at, of course, the liquid route, because that is what we can do now, make ammonia and then put it in a ship. But a much cheaper option, if you have enough hydrogen, would be a pipeline. And then we looked at the the planned EastMed pipeline that is through the eastern part of the Mediterranean. We could actually extend that through Egypt to Saudi Arabia and then feed it with green hydrogen. Of course, you would then have to make the entire pipeline system hydrogen instead of natural gas, which is the original plan. But that can all be done. Even if you have natural gas, you can take the carbon out through pyrolysis and then feed green hydrogen into that pipeline. We also considered linking that to Jordan and Egypt. There's other countries that could feed into that same pipeline system. And yes, there is concerns now with another dependency, given the situation with Russia. At the same time, I mean, the beauty about hydrogen is that you have a lot more options. I mean, you can actually, because anybody that has a good location can produce hydrogen and ammonia and can become part of that global value chain. So I don't think we should be too concerned about another energy dependency because, again, we do have more options. And I think this is something that any country in the Commonwealth, including India, including, of course, most African nations that have abundant renewable energy resource could tap into and become a global player, different from what it is right now. That is my opening statement.
Yes, and what an opening statement. I think you really convinced us about the exponential growth. So thank you very much. And next speaker is Fomik Musha about how to finance it. Fomik, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Nenke. Thanks. Thank you very much for, first of all, to you and to the Commonwealth Enterprise and Investment Council for inviting me and having me here. It's been, I have the advantage of going, I think last, so I've had the benefit of listening to our esteemed panelists with us. So I'm representing UK Export Finance here today. As an introduction to who we are, UK Export Finance, as the name suggests, we provide financing support to encourage exports out of the UK. So we do what it says on the tin. We are a government department, so from that standpoint, we are closely aligned with the British government's trade and investment strategy, and work closely with our partners in the Department of International Trade and the Foreign Office to identify projects and opportunities where we could provide our financing. We, in financial parlance, so to speak, you might hear references to us as an ECA, Export Credit Agency. So, so we are Britain's ECA, and you will see that word bandied around quite often, especially in the city. As Nenke said, I'm here to bring to add the finance angle to the discussion, because we firmly believe that it is, at the end of the day, finance that focuses the minds. And I was having a look at the chat column. There were quite a few questions around funding and financing, which I was reassured to see. So we, as an export credit agency and as a British government department, our mandate and mission is to encourage international trade between the UK and our overseas partners, and clearly the Commonwealth countries are our closest overseas counterparties. We engage in a lot of activities with most of the Commonwealth countries, particularly in Africa. And the form of our support comes in two ways. We will either provide support to British businesses here in the UK who are looking to export, and they need some support, either funding support or insurance, which is a key part of any trade that takes place, international trade that takes place. We come in and provide the support to these UK businesses. These typically tend to be smaller enterprises, so SMEs, but also in certain instances, some of the larger corporates also require some support from our side, particularly given the uncertain environment that we thought we were coming out of the pandemic, but again, we are in another global crisis. This is where we come into our own. We pride ourselves in having an almost a counter-cyclical model. Whenever the uncertainty in the markets and the world increases, then our role expands, because we are there to provide the cushion of British government support to encourage to ensure that the final financing is taking place to get the projects over the line. So that's one part of our support, which is to British businesses directly. The second part, which is what I spend a lot of time on, and which would be of interest to a majority of the audience, I suspect, is that we provide financing support for projects overseas, and basically ensuring that a project, rather than just being an idea, it gets implemented. For us to support projects overseas and project to be eligible for our support, we require a certain degree of what we call UK content. At the end of the day, we are providing financing to encourage international trade with the UK, and that is manifested by exports of goods and services from the UK. But we fully appreciate that in a project overseas, it could be in any sector, procurement, so to speak, or delivery of the project will come from a variety of sources. We are happy with that. We firmly believe in encouraging international trade in a mutually beneficial manner. So our minimum requirement is for a project to have 20% by value UK content. So in the context of today's discussion, if there's a hydrogen facility being built in a certain market, we will look at the capital expenditure required for that project. And if at least 20% in the form of both goods as well as services, so project management, design, engineering of the plant, is and can be procured from the UK, we will provide support in excess of the actual UK content. So so we will support a significant part of the whole cost of the project. The hydrogen, my more knowledgeable colleagues on the technical side have covered have covered that far better than I would. I'm a finance person. What I would say is that for us, it's a priority sector. For a variety of reasons, not least because the British government put in place a fossil fuel policy last year, which restricts our ability to support oil and gas fossil fuel projects overseas. So, over the last year, 18 months, I've been spending most of my time on clean growth, clean energy prospects. And hydrogen is key for us. The UK Export Finance, along with the British government, has a net zero ambition of cleaning up of having net zero in our portfolio and operations by 2050, and building out a portfolio of hydrogen finance projects through us will be a key enabler for us. To that extent, we have a direct lending facility, because our support comes in two forms. Either we work with the bank and provide them with a guarantee, or we provide direct lending. And for higher green projects, which hydrogen will obviously qualify for, we have a specific direct lending facility on that basis. So, so just to summarize from my standpoint, we are an important source of financing. It is part of the UK government's toolkit. Our mission is to promote development of projects overseas through promotion of international trade with our partners overseas. We are not a development bank, just to be clear, in its truest sense. Our support comes in the form of loans, effectively, either directly or indirectly. So, but that is fine, because we are providing competitive financing, which enables project sponsors and investors in Commonwealth markets to secure a source of funding which has the backing of the British government and all the positive effects that come along with it, including ENS considerations, among others. So we are project driven. So I look forward to getting familiar with some of the ambitions of the association and the key players here in the Commonwealth. And for us, the projects, because our support is linked to specific opportunities and projects, I look forward to educating myself on what's active, what's happening around the market, and work together with you all to see ways in which our support could be eligible for the projects that you have in mind. So I will stop here, Nenke.
Yes, wonderful. So we are learning by doing, I would say. So thank you for the information about what, when, and especially how to support the hydrogen economy. Thank you very much. I will switch over to the London Stock Exchange, and we have the Group Director and Ubukun Adebayo. Please. Oh, I think you have to unmute yourself. And start all over, because we don't want
There we are. We'll have to start again. So that's probably the most overused expression of 2020 and 2021 and 2022. You're on mute. I fell foul of that again. Apologies. Nenke, thank you very much. And a good afternoon and good morning to everybody. Just congratulations, by the way, to CWIC and AHP and others for putting on this very important webinar. I'm going to spend about 5 minutes, hopefully, just talking about LSEG's role in sustainability in Africa and essentially helping to finance the energy transition that's required across Africa. Before I go into that, just as LSEG is a global stock exchange centred in the City of London, we've taken this matter very seriously. I think over the years, LSEG has been a home for large fossil fuel emitter type companies to come and list on our market. So for that reason, we've taken some very important steps in terms of building out our sustainability offering to encourage companies and an ecosystem to develop more sustainable businesses over the long term. In terms of us as a group, our carbon footprint is well down from last year. We're down some 35% on an ongoing trend. And we released our climate transition plan as well, which demonstrates that we will, across scope 1 and 2 and 3 emissions, be at net zero by roughly 2030. I love these ambitious plans around green hydrogen for Africa, but I think there's a demonstration of the fact that there is going to be an extreme challenge in terms of the source of the green energy, which is the renewable energy in Africa being developed efficiently. And the reason for this is that really weaning Africa off of energy produced by fossil fuels is going to be an immense task. And the reason for this is well documented, but just for the sense of the occasion, Africa's population, as we all know, is going to double by 2050 to 2.5 billion people. It's about 30% of the world's population at that time. And there will be extreme economic challenges of that growing population. Energy transition itself is going to cost about $90 billion per year for the next decades to meet the next net zero targets by 2050. That's IRENA statistics. And financing for this transition just remains elusive. It's both risky to deploy in Africa for lots of different reasons. And for that reason, it continues to present the risks that African governments will continue to discourage renewable energy production because of their domestic challenges, which in turn thwarts the plans of Africa being a contributor to the green hydrogen revolution. And these policies are in place even today. So for example, in Africa, you have a paradoxical policy which presents a 5% tax on solar products, and so solar panels when you're purchasing for a solar project. And in fact, a 20% tax on deep cycle batteries, for example, which stores that energy, whilst at the same time continuing to provide subsidies for oil production leading to energy production in Africa. So we have a challenge in front of us, and we have a challenge both in terms of policy and financing. And that $90 billion a year, just to put it into context, last year was more than Africa's overseas development assistance, foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, and remittances combined. So governments and DFIs are not going to be able to solve these issues. You'd expect me to say this, but we think that capital markets can be a major contributor to solving this challenge. And some markets, like the LSEG, have evolved very quickly and adapted to this critical task of financing the global rush to net zero. And financial instruments are around, and we're all very familiar with them. So things such as sustainable bonds and ESG-related exchange-traded funds are now established asset classes on markets like ours and other developed markets. Not so much in Africa, but that is happening. And these are now practical tools that can be used by investors and issuers who are committed to this cause. So what we're trying to do at LSEG these days is to create a deeper, more comprehensive set of tools to meet this renewable energy financing conundrum. And just before I go into that very quickly, green bond issuance, for example, is something that we're all familiar with, and the market has done tremendously well. We're set to break $1 trillion in terms of global issuance, a steady rise from $100 billion, which was the first year that mark was, sorry, in 2017, which was the first year that mark was reached. But the problem with debt is that it's number one, it's generally issued at company level, and that creates a problem if a company has some form of sort of dirty fuel production or some non-sustainable function. And also, debt acts less of a partner. This is less of a partner capital, where equity is much more about investors and governments and project developers working together. So to alleviate this challenge, London Stock Exchange announced at COP26 the development of a market that for the time being we're calling the voluntary carbon market. Now let me explain what this is. It's the first time that there will ever be a market that is dedicated to investing specifically into renewable energy projects in the global south. The instrument that will be used is an equity product. It's an equity fund, which is effectively bringing a series of eligible bankable projects into a fund which is managed by a recognized fund manager, where individual projects are developed by recognized project developers. And the unique part is that the financing goes directly into those projects. So you're effectively getting project finance at a capital market level, which has never happened previously. The second part that's important on this work is that there is a special dispensation to allow for a special dividend, where instead of an investor receiving a cash dividend, the investor receives a carbon credit, which is based on the removal or avoidance of carbon from that specific project. And this allows all types of investors to participate in this market. So we're now encouraging through this market investors from Google to GSK who are seeking to meet their net zero targets, as well as traditional investors who are looking at this type of investment opportunity. So this really provides a first in market type opportunity. So we're delighted that we hope to launch this market by the end of 2022. What else is LSEG doing in this space, just very briefly? So in addition to capital markets, we have a range of data and analytics tools which are helping investors to make more robust, sustainable types of investments. So everything from ESG data to indices, and as well to things such as green economy marks. The one thing I just wanted to mention as a parting thought here is that ESG assets today, or by 2024, are set to be about $53 trillion, which is about 1/3 of all assets under management. So as we think about developing green hydrogen across Africa, it's important that we don't just look at the environmental effects, but the social and the governance effects as well. governance in the sense that we should spend a lot more time, as other speakers have talked about building local, stronger institutions and better governance in terms of interaction with overseas governments to avoid this theory of neoclassic colonialism around green hydrogen. And then finally, on the social side, ensuring that African economies develop with green hydrogen, driving manufacturing, for example, whereas we know $1 invested into manufacturing creates 17 times more jobs than $1 invested into fossil fuel economy. So making green hydrogen investment a true impact investment is critical, not just meeting SDG 7 and 13. Thank you. Apologies for the overrun.
No problem, because it was a wonderful answer. Because the Sustainable Development Goals, how can we let green hydrogen contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals? That's an important part. And yes, actually, we now have to switch over to the panel discussion. But I first want to thank you for all the information and all the presentations. Thank you very much. And an important question, of course, to be answered today, of course, is what are the most important issues or problems that needs to be addressed? And we have a lot of questions that are about kickstarting the hydrogen economy and also about, I think, the social impact. So the question is, how can we create jobs and how can we upskill all the local population so they can contribute to this green hydrogen economy, and also that we have new jobs? So this is a question that was addressed in the chat, and I just want to start with this question. What kind of work, what can we do to really upskill the local population? It's not about investments like only finance, but it is investment in the local population. Is someone of the panel just want to answer the question? I have an idea. Perhaps Ulrike, a last impact reaction.
Is that going to me then, Ninka?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So I think there's a lot that can be done. I think in particular, the UK government does have a significant focus now in terms of a prosperity agenda which looks at things of this nature. Upskilling local talent, I think, is very much part of what could be offered in terms of some form of technical assistance. I mentioned a statistic that was from the AFDB, which talks about developing manufacturing and indeed using the value chain opportunity, which is going to be presented through the Africa Free Trade Agreement, which is coming in across the continent over the next few years. I think that'll be a vital combination of bringing those two things together in order to look at how this sector works. But it's vitally important that we make that leapfrog opportunity happen within Africa as well, in terms of how green energy is used. Using it, particularly just having it as an import or export function, will not be enough. Driving jobs and driving value creation, but also driving technical expertise, I think, will be vital. And there are many ways to look at that. But it's important that the UK government also has a focus on that, and that is demonstrated as we move forward.
And perhaps do we have some best practices in the region or somewhere, how to finance the upskilling of the local talent? Wonderful sentence. I'll have a look around to the panelists. Perhaps, Frank, do you have some best practices in the local talent, skilling local talent?
Well, perhaps, I mean, maybe if we look at Morocco is of course one of the largest phosphate producers in the world through OCP, and they set up a joint venture with then Jacobs, now Worley. That joint venture company is a 50-50 joint venture, 2,500 people, and they basically run all the operations. They have a large fertilizer operation in Morocco, but they're also active in Senegal and other countries. So perhaps that could be a model. We have a local company that basically teams up with an international engineering company that can then basically tap into all the knowledge from a global group. And then, you know, the people that I've worked with at Jezza, which is the name of the company, they're really great. They're top notch. They know what they're doing, and are also able to finance projects, attract capital, etc. So perhaps that could be a model.
Thank you. A totally different question, but I hear it all around here. The difference between how to use the green ammonia, what's the difference with the green hydrogen? Perhaps our professor can tell some more about it.
All right, thanks, Nika. I think before I move into that, I just want to talk about, add to the point that we're making about local talents. I think it's important to think about this in the long term. So some of these targets are looking at 20 years, looking even longer, which means the people that will be making decisions that may be using this hydrogen of the future, they actually may be in their elementary school today. So it's important that we look at educating people at that level as well, at STEM level, going to school. So we started that at my university. That's been translated to a few languages now. And I think it's not just, you know, it shouldn't just be done within the UK. That also needs to be, you know, addressed across the world so that people at very young age know what hydrogen is about and how it impacts them. What we don't want to happen is that in 10 years' time, we have people who don't really know much about this and they think, well, this is not what we're going with, and they happens to be the decision maker. So that's the first one. But in terms of ammonia and hydrogen, and I think it's just briefly to talk about other things that you can use hydrogen for. Hydrogen in its purest form, when you get it out of water, yes, it becomes energy carrier, and you can basically use that, as I explained earlier on. But what is great about hydrogen is that you can then combine that, because, you know, the process of producing it is actually green. You can then add it to anything, and that becomes green. So an example would be in ammonia. When you add it to nitrogen, it becomes green, a green ammonia. And what is unique about ammonia is that it's easier to transport, as been said before, because you can store it at a lower, you know, a much reasonable temperature and pressure. And because there's already a supply chain for that across the world, safety and everything has been taken care of already. So it's easier to start working with ammonia before we talked about other aspects of hydrogen. That also leads to fertilizer, and that becomes, you know, big in terms of decarbonizing the agriculture sector, helping us to meet that, which basically means that the food process becomes decarbonized. If we can get fertilizer to be green through ammonia, that would be great as well. There are other synthetic fuels, such as, you know, somebody asked a question about methanol as well. Actually, methanol, depending on how you get your CO2, if you combine it with a green hydrogen, in a way you can make it green for the future. Again, because it is liquid, it is easier to transport. It's something that, you know, can start using the existing infrastructure. You don't need new infrastructure, which you need for the hydrogen we've been talking about earlier. So there's so much you can do with hydrogen. We've not even spoken about transport yet in high HGV and so on.
Yeah, so we have a lot of issues to tackle, and we're going to do it, of course, and we're going to do it together. And there are some questions about what kind of support, financial or technical, is available. And I'd like to ask Stephen Jackson to elaborate some more. How did you do it at Hydrogen Europe? Because you realized some impressive projects together. So what did you do, and what is the best way to orchestrate the demand and the production side?
Okay, thank you. Well, Hydrogen Europe started off as the private partner within a private-public partnership we have with the Commission. So we've been in this private-public partnership since 2008, actually. And we started off very much on the research and innovation side of things. So in this partnership, we have the Commission on the one hand, industry and research all teaming up together to develop technologies. And that's where we've been able to obviously develop technologies on the electrolysis side, whether it be alkaline or PEM, but also hydrogen refueling stations, buses. And this started a while back with a budget of roughly 350 million. Now we are at 1 billion of budget for the next 7 years. And we're continuing on that path to do research on technologies for example, trucking, maritime, but also aviation, and offshore wind, industrial uses. So as you see, I mean, there are quite a few other technologies now we are working on. Well, gradually, I mean, obviously technology is still extremely important, but in parallel, what we have to do is work on creating the right markets for our product. So increasingly, our work has been not only on the R&I side, but also on the policy side to ensure that we have the right markets further down the line. And now it's really a question of scaling up the already existing technologies, because it's not, I mean, quite a few of our technologies are perfectly mature now. When we talk about the electrolysis side of things, we have very mature technologies, and now it's a question really of scaling up. And given the new targets that were communicated at the beginning of this panel, it's a manufacturing issue now too. So we really need to ramp up on that side. But then part of your question was, well, what would be my recommendation? I think here, I mean, it's really partnering with all the different stakeholders to get it off the ground. I mean, in our particular instance here, it's together with, well, the European Commission, but member states as well, regional partners, and then industry and research in order to deploy our technology.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, manufacturing, working together, shared technologies. Yeah, this the start of the webinar today was about the family and connecting the dots. And we have an interesting question, and it is about, it's from Fabri, and it is about the potential of North Africa and the Mediterranean region, that it is huge, and it is also about maritime fuel and the possibility of there. And we are interested, some of the members and some of the attendants are interested in how can we use these kind of opportunities in the Mediterranean by connecting North Africa, Africa, and Europe. Perhaps a question for the ambassador. How can we use those situations and use the regions that want to connect and play a role in connecting Africa and Europe?
Well, Nika, this is exactly what it's not just the African countries such as Morocco and Egypt who are looking into that. We're looking into becoming large exporter of electron, I mean green electron and green molecules. If you were to read their national strategy and the plans and the projects which are being now sort of in the planning stage, this is exactly the idea. Europe is a massive market. It's a solvable market. Clearly, with the ongoing situation in Ukraine, it has even increased that prospect and the opportunities. So definitely, This is the case. You know, I started with North Africa, Morocco, and Egypt, but even as far as Namibia was signing an MOU with Germany and was also positioning itself to export significant quantities of green hydrogen to Europe. This is again, I think Europe is the most mature market right now. So in terms of export, this is where countries are looking into. But as I said, as the AHP, we also have an inward or an African domestic markets interest for the purpose of industrializing the continent and accelerating sustainable development. But this is exactly what countries are focusing on now: large-scale production and exports to the EU.
Yeah. Yes, wonderful. So we have the time issue at 2030. We have the skill issue, how to upscale, and there are some questions about the renewable energy production. And of course, we have the finance opportunities. And yeah, I'm afraid we are running out of time. So I'd like to kind of give the floor for some final remarks on video. So please listen to and feel inspired by Honourable Cameron Dick.
It is an honour to address such a large and significant gathering today. The decarbonisation of energy markets and the transition to clean fuels is a global objective and a goal Queensland is on track to achieve. Our state is proud to have in place a 50% renewable energy target by 2030, and we've also committed to reaching net zero emissions by 2050. Queensland's progress towards these targets is supported by our abundant natural resources, namely sunshine and wind. This, combined with our extensive network of energy infrastructure, powers a flourishing renewables industry here in this state. We currently have 34 large-scale renewable energy projects operational in Queensland. A further 14 are under construction or have achieved final investment decision. In real terms, this means around 20% of Queensland's energy is currently being sourced from renewables. And in the coming years, that percentage will continue to increase as we charge towards our targets. We are using our growing renewables and emerging green hydrogen industries to work with global partners in achieving shared objectives. This is being driven by our Queensland Hydrogen Industry Strategy and boosted through attraction incentives to do business in our state. This includes our $2 billion Queensland Renewable Energy and Hydrogen Jobs Fund, one of the biggest funds of its kind ever launched in Australia. It allows government-owned energy corporations to increase ownership of renewable energy and hydrogen projects in partnership with the private sector. Construction is also underway on the $20 million Hydrogen Training Centre of Excellence at Beenleigh, near Brisbane. This new state-of-the-art facility will attract new talent to the industry and allow us to develop the skills needed for our workforce of tomorrow. Green hydrogen is the clean fuel of the future, and Queensland is working hard to ensure it provides a brighter future for all of us.
Yes, also some wonderful final words about the talent that is needed. But I am afraid that that is all we have for time this morning. So thank you so much to all our panelists and thank to everyone else joining this webinar. I hope you all have a better idea of what green hydrogen is and what it can do for us all and the world. And what in particular it might mean for the Commonwealth and the world. I hope you all have a very good rest of the day. Goodbye from all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
you.
Everyone.